All right, let's jump right in. In this explainer, we are going to break down a pretty compelling and, let's be honest, pretty unsettling argument. The idea is that there's a predictable four-stage pattern to economic collapse that has repeated itself all throughout history, and that this exact same pattern might be playing out right now in the United States. Now, the source material for this kicks off with a claim that, well, it's designed to get your attention. And this isn't just some vague prediction, you know? It's framed as the final conclusion of a deep dive into history. The core argument is that the wealth of nearly 40% of all American households is seriously at risk. So what on earth is this based on? It's based on this number. According to this analysis, the central problem is the U.S. national debt, which is now at a truly staggering $36.2 trillion. The argument goes that no country in the history of the world has ever survived this level of debt without a major monetary crisis. And here's the crucial part, according to the source. This isn't about random chaos or just bad luck. The argument here, and it's a big one, is that every major financial collapse, and I mean every single one, follows the exact same blueprint, a predictable four-stage formula that's been repeated for over 2,000 years. And here are the four stages. It always starts with stage one, the foundation, where you have a stable and trusted currency. Then comes stage two, debasement. This is when the government starts printing money and borrowing like there's no tomorrow. That leads to stage three, loss of control, where inflation really starts to spiral. And finally, you get to stage four, collapse. That's where the currency fails and just wipes out people's savings.
So how do we know this isn't just some crazy theory? Well, the source material we're looking at points to history as the ultimate proof, arguing that this pattern is basically a law of economics. Let's take a look at a couple of really famous examples.
First up, the Roman Empire. I mean, at its peak, Rome was the world's undisputed superpower, right? And its economy was built on this incredibly solid foundation, the silver denarius. It was a coin that was trusted across the entire known world. That was their stage one. And wow, the slide really shows you stage two, debasement in action. Roman emperors needed cash for their endless wars and to keep the public happy, so they started secretly, quietly, reducing the amount of silver in their coins. It was like a slow poison. As you can see, a coin that was 95% pure silver in 64 AD was less than 5% silver just 2 centuries later. The result? Well, it's predictable, right? Prices went through the roof, you had total economic chaos, and eventually, nobody trusted their money anymore. All right, let's fast forward a bit to a more modern example. Weimar Germany in the 1920s. Now, this wasn't some ancient, far-off empire. This was one of the most advanced industrial nations on Earth, full of highly educated people. They started with a strong foundation, a solid stage one. But after World War I, Germany was forced to pay these impossible war reparations. So what did the government do? They turned on the printing presses. And this number right here, it just shows you how catastrophic the result was. By November of 1923, a single loaf of bread cost 200 billion marks. People were literally hauling wheelbarrows full of cash just to buy groceries. The entire life savings of the middle class, gone, wiped out in a matter of months. That's stages 3 and 4, complete. Okay, so Rome and Germany give us a pretty clear roadmap. You start with a solid currency, then you have that really tempting political move of debasing the currency, and that ultimately leads to collapse. So the source then asks the most critical question, where is the United States on that same path today? The argument is that the nation is already deep into stage 3. So according to this analysis, America's stage 2, that debasement phase, it didn't just happen gradually. It started at a very specific moment in time, 1971. That was the year President Nixon completely severed the US dollar's last link to gold. And just like that, it became a pure fiat currency. All that means is its value doesn't come from anything physical, it just comes from a government promise and our trust in that promise. And check this out. This chart just perfectly illustrates what happened next. With the dollar no longer tied to gold, the government was basically free to borrow and print money without any real restraint. The U.S. national debt exploded from less than $400 billion in 1971 to over $36 trillion today. That is an absolutely staggering increase of over 9,000%. This, the source argues, is the very definition of stage 2 debasement. And that brings us to stage 3, loss of control. The argument here is that while the government might be telling you one story with official numbers like the Consumer Price Index or CPI, the reality for everyday people is something else entirely. It points to the real costs of the things you just can't live without: your housing, your food, your insurance, and how they've been skyrocketing. This growing gap between the official story and your real-world costs is a classic sign that confidence in the currency is starting to crack.
And this all loops back to that shocking claim from the very beginning, that 40% of households at risk, we're talking about roughly 127 million people, are the ones whose wealth is mostly held in dollar-denominated assets. Think about it. Your savings account, your 401k, your pension. What are they really? They're basically just promises whose value is completely 100% dependent on the health of the US dollar. So, right about now, you're probably thinking, okay, but come on. The US isn't Rome, we're different. The source material totally anticipates this, and it directly addresses what it calls the myths of American immunity. This is the #1 objection, right? The idea that with all our modern technology, our innovation, and our global power, you just can't compare us to these old empires. That this time, it's just different. But the rebuttal from the source is, well, it's simple, and it's pretty brutal. The Romans were convinced their empire was eternal. The Germans believed their industrial power made them invincible. The belief that this time is different, the analysis argues, isn't a sign of strength. It's a recurring feature of every single civilization right before its fall. Okay, so what's the other big argument you always hear? It's that the US dollar is the world's reserve currency, so we're safe. The thinking goes that since the entire world needs dollars to do business, America just can't fail. But this analysis argues that's a really dangerous way to think about it. Being the reserve currency doesn't give you immunity. It just allows a country to export its inflation by selling its growing debt to other nations. Basically, it just prolongs stage 2, letting the problem get way, way bigger than it ever could otherwise. It's like building a bigger and bigger dam, but you're not doing anything to stop the river from rising. The final mathematical outcome doesn't change. So, if you accept the premise that this historical pattern is unbreakable, the really obvious question is, what do you do about it? Right here, the source material shifts from just diagnosing the problem to prescribing a solution, a strategy for preserving your wealth. So what's the game plan? According to the source, it boils down to 4 key steps. First, move your wealth into hard assets. We're talking about things you can actually touch, things they can't just print more of, like gold or maybe productive real estate. Second, reduce how much you're exposed to those paper promises priced in dollars, like long-term bonds or fixed pensions. Third, invest in real-world skills that have value no matter what the economy is doing. And finally, and maybe most importantly, simply understand this historical pattern so you can see the signs for yourself. And this is the final, really provocative question the source leaves us with. It reframes a potential collapse not just as an act of destruction, but as maybe the largest transfer of wealth in modern history. A transfer away from those who put their trust in paper promises and ignore history, and toward those who understand the pattern and position themselves for what's coming. That's a powerful thought to end on.